Look, if you're the kind of person who's constantly drawn to learning new things, I'm willing to bet you've got a closely guarded secret. A hidden graveyard of hobbies, interests, and half-finished projects that you've just kind of walked away from over the years. And you've probably kept it completely to yourself, right? Because honestly, it feels a little bit like a failure.
We're talking about that ukulele in the back of your closet that you played for exactly 3 weeks. Or maybe, actually, check your laptop right now, there's probably a half-finished coding project just sitting there dormant. Then there's that massive stack of unread investing books right next to a private poetry journal that you've never shown anyone. If your project closet looks exactly like this, you've likely spent your entire life being told by society, and let's be real, your own loud inner critic, that you absolutely lack discipline, that you simply cannot pick a lane.
So, are you just flaky? Unfocused? Well, what if I told you your brain isn't broken at all? What if, instead, it's actually using a highly sophisticated strategy to prep you for the future, a future that, quite frankly, traditional specialists are completely unready for? Throughout this explainer, we're going to see how we've basically been looking at this so-called flakiness all wrong. We frame it as this huge weakness, but it's actually an entirely distinct cognitive strategy. To really understand why you feel so incredibly scattered, we first have to admit something. We all grew up inside an outdated system that was designed exactly like an industrial factory. Think about it. The entire structure of our education, the whole professional world, it's all built on this rigid one input, one output model. The instructions we got were super simple. Pick a major, pick a career. Now dig one single hole as deep as you possibly can. Now, digging one deep hole, that was absolutely great for a slow-moving, predictable world. But we are living in a modern world that behaves way more like a chaotic chess game. It's like someone literally flips the board every single week, totally changes the rules, and says, hey, we're playing a completely different game tomorrow. In that kind of wildly unpredictable environment, well, the person who only knows one single move, the one who only dug that one hole, they're in serious trouble.
So here's the real game changer. Your refusal to specialize isn't a flaw, and it's definitely not a lack of commitment. You aren't just bouncing around randomly, even if it feels that way. You're actually building an entirely different, incredibly adaptable cognitive structure. You aren't building a single spike, you are building an M shape.
Let's break this down real quick. Think of the traditional specialist like the letter I. It's just one deep, narrow spike of knowledge. Then you have the generalist, which is essentially just a flat line. Sure, it's broad, but it's entirely shallow. They know a little bit about everything, but definitely not enough to truly innovate. The M shape, though, that combines the absolute best of both worlds. We're talking about having 2 or 3 real deep pillars of skill, but, and this is the crucial part, they're connected by this really powerful wide bridge of transferable thinking.
And this wide bridge of thinking, it gives you a literal cognitive superpower. In psychology, it actually has a specific name, far transfer. You see, most people solve problems by just looking for a solution that looks almost exactly like the problem right in front of them. But with far transfer, you have this incredibly rare ability to pull concepts from completely unrelated worlds and just drop them into new, entirely different environments. It allows you to spot brilliant, out-of-the-box solutions that traditional specialists are frankly completely blind to.
Let's look at how this actually plays out in real life. Say on Tuesday, you're deeply engrossed in watching a documentary about ant colonies. Now, most people would look at that and call it a massive distraction from your real work. But then Thursday rolls around and suddenly you're restructuring your entire corporate team's communication workflow based on the exact patterns you just noticed in those insects. Your scattered interests aren't creating chaos. Actually, scratch that, they might look chaotic, but they're really creating these incredibly unique, high-level connections. Or think about a musician who suddenly transitions into software development. I mean, on paper, those two fields have absolutely nothing in common, right? But because that musician deeply understands rhythm, structure, and how tension and release create an emotional experience, they don't just type out functional code. They build software that just feels right. It's an intuitive user experience that a pure, by-the-books engineer could just never replicate. Why? Because the musician brings an entirely different way of perceiving the world with them. They aren't just coding anymore, they're composing.
Now, even with this cognitive superpower, I know exactly why you still feel like you're constantly lagging behind. You probably look around at people your own age who chose that single clear path. You watch them getting predictable promotions, snagging fancy titles, and basically having this very simple linear story that they can effortlessly drop at dinner parties. And meanwhile, you feel like you're just constantly starting over from scratch.
Here's the difference.
The specialist builds exactly like a skyscraper. Their progress goes straight up, it's 100% visible right there on the surface, and it's incredibly easy for society to just look at and applaud. But you? You're building like a massive underground root system. For years, literally nothing visible happens on the surface. But underneath, you're doing this silent, invisible work. You're growing and connecting disparate fields deep underground, completely out of sight from everyone else.
So, yeah, to the outside world, it might totally look like you're just wasting time, mostly because they can't see a skyscraper. But what they don't get is that when your diverse root system finally breaks through the surface, it doesn't just sprout one single tree. Now, because of all those deep, varied connections, it produces an entire thriving, interconnected ecosystem.
Okay, having an M-shaped mind is awesome, but it definitely comes with a massive risk, and we really need to talk about its biggest trap. The trap is trying to build every single pillar of your M at the exact same time, like trying to learn coding, write poetry, master investing, and play the ukulele all in the exact same week. That isn't ambition, that's just fragmentation. And let me tell you, it leads directly to exhausting, totally paralyzing burnout.
So instead of trying to do the whole shebang all at once, you really need to change your approach. You have to start viewing your varied interests sequentially. Think of them as focused, dedicated seasons of learning. For example, you might dedicate an entire year just to photography, truly immersing yourself in it. Then you naturally transition to a deep dive into a coding project the following year, which is maybe followed by a season totally dedicated to studying investments.
When you look at it through this lens, that massive photography obsession you dropped 3 years ago, it wasn't a failure, it wasn't a lack of commitment, it was just a completed season. Your brain went in, absorbed the exact input it needed from that field, stuff like lighting, framing, maybe a new perspective, and then it naturally moved on, simply because it was ready for the very next piece of the puzzle. And honestly, there's a huge danger in fighting this natural process. Think about it. There's a version of your future where you finally give in to the pressure. You force yourself into one narrow lane. You delete all the side projects, you completely ignore your curiosity, and you become that highly focused, single-track person that society keeps demanding you to be. But if you do that, you risk losing your unique strategic edge entirely.
If you force yourself into that industrial factory mold, there is a profound, almost heartbreaking cost. It's a quiet dimming. The part of you that absolutely lights up when it discovers something brand new, it just goes silent. And you end up spending your entire career being really good at just one thing while knowing, deep down, that you are capable of seeing the entire board.
Because the reality is, the future desperately needs people who flat out refuse to pick a lane. We need people whose brains constantly pull them sideways to find the real signal in all the noise. Listen. Every single random obsession you've ever had has added a vital node to a strategic network inside your head, a network that is still actively growing right now. You were never meant to be just one thing. You are the connection between things that nobody else can even see.
So let's get one thing straight. Your mind isn't flaky, and you certainly aren't broken. Your mind is perfectly built for an M-shaped future. So as we wrap up this explainer, I have to ask, are you finally ready to stop apologizing for your lack of focus and start treating it as your ultimate competitive advantage? How are you going to use your M-shaped mind tomorrow?